Ready? Okay. Extending number 3 argument, you presume the baby's rights are all human rights because it accords with our moral intuition, because our moral intuition provides some reason for action, so absolutely normative reasons for why babies would not have rights, and that gives you a reason to say that babies have rights. He can say is the definition key. First exchange is storing cost of which is where babies have rights, where babies don't have rights. He never provides a warrant either way, which means that I have the only word in the round he's dropped that argument, which means you presume that babies have rights, so if there is no moral distinction between babies and animals that warrants different treatment, that means you can give both animals and babies rights because babies do have rights. So then let's go to the NC first. The NC is going to be taken out by multiple arguments. First, the Taylor argument takes out the NC because it says the animals are moral subjects. If animals are moral subjects, that means that they are afforded rights because moral subjects are speaks to the law or poorly, which means that the Taylor argument is indicate that any sort of capability that animals have would mean that any duty would become a right. Second, the Mackey evidence takes out the NC because the Mackey evidence says that any system of justice cannot be exhaustive in terms of affording prescriptions. I.e., cannot do a tailored system because a tailored system would not be able to prescribe to all the millions of circumstances that exist. So a justice must perform a general policy where we would have negative rights because negative rights are the only way we can conceptualize action within a framework that is not exhaustive. That means that if rights have to be negative, so if you have a prescription in terms of tailored policies, that makes no sense. He's also dropping Mackey evidence, which means that I have 100% strength link in the issue. Third, the Nash evidence takes it out because the duties are rights. At the point where there are two sides of the same coin, i.e., since rights are mutually recognized relationship, if you have a duty to someone, that means they have a right to that duty. His example that the teacher doesn't make any sense because the teacher is not in terms of justice. My argument in terms of justice is that when the government gives rights to somebody, it means that they have the right to have that person, that is, since it's a mutual relationship, that people have a right to not have that action happen. Then go to the potential law and subject to why. First, my argument this is not mutually exclusive from rights because my argument we can have rights, but we can still tailor policies in different ways. There's no reason for why the rights impede this argument because it's not the EAC. Second of all, there's a question of whether or not we should have when you fill the policies in the first place. The standard talks about strength link. There's no reason why strength linked what? He says the justice, being able to respond to justice is in terms of being able to do. My argument is that giving people their dues, avoiding pain in terms of rights, which means that he just links into my argument, which we need to affirm. Then, also number 3, he doesn't say that there's any sort of positive obligation. Taylor arguments, my argument is that this rights are negative. They don't create any positive obligation to people to act. So if I don't interfere with you, that is not mean that I tailor policies. Tailoring policies is not an obligation in terms of justice, which means it's ever says linked to justice. Also, animal welfare is worse because my argument is that it causes, it would cause, for example, political entrenchment, i.e., the public is not in sync with the animal welfare movement, or animal welfare movement, or some sort of tailored policies. My argument is that we have to have rights in order to have some sort of concrete protection. Then go to the EAC. So, the NC is taken on multiple levels. Let me explain to the EAC how these arguments function. First on Nash. Extending the rights of demands and nations by parties, moral duties mean action relation rights because there are two sides of the same coin, i.e., if you have a duty to someone, then they have a right to that duty. Remember, his teacher example doesn't make sense because it's not specific to justice and it's not specific in terms of how justice works in terms of mutual recognition of rights. Then on Taylor. Extend the moral subject mutually right one without being Asians, and from Taylor specific that babies have rights. So there are two places that I establish that babies have rights, which means that even if they don't have some sort of capacity, it means that there's no reason why they have to be moral agents. This takes out the arguments about how animals don't have any sort of moral freedom on the NC or any sort of capacity, because my argument is that they're not necessarily humans to do that, and since he has to defend all humans have rights, it means that there's an arbitrary distinction that he's created. He says that this turns here because my argument is that nobody would have rights. My argument is that that is the definition of subject, and moral subjects have rights. The second argument is that the positive argument is that the animals don't have them, so this is a descriptive argument. My argument is prescriptive, so my argument tells you what to do. Then on the Williams evidence, he misunderstands the extent that internal reasons of non-comparing conception of how actions are explained because external motivation that explains psychological links to belief. This implies that the only way we can act is if we have a motivating reason to act, so motivating reasons provide the only explanation of how we're acting with those reasons at all. My argument is that there's no reason for why the fact that animals lack a certain capacity gives us a motivational reason to give them rights, whereas the fact that we all feel pain gives us a motivational reason to avoid pain. He says there are conflicting moral pains in the way we need tailor treatment, that he can't use the potential level opposite of the NC to turn the NC into turn the AC, which means it doesn't matter. Conflicting rights claims there, it doesn't give an implication of that in terms of justice, that you shouldn't grant that argument. Then on Mackey. So then equals class of rights because their initial number choice for moral subjects based possible decisions they can make. That extent negative because the pain provides a motivational reason. He says this is false because there are many forms of pain. My argument is that pain is always bad. That is, my argument is that it paralyzes action. My argument is that first there's no implication paralyzes action. Second, even if we would override justice in certain cases, that means we would just override justice and use other concerns. We would say like practical concerns override justice. There's no reason for that. Then contextual argument, he just says that there's paternalism, there's no link, but extend we already have evidence that animals are constantly experiencing pain, birth, pay attention to pain sensation except when they're distracted from it. So the arguments about oppression don't matter, and the paternalism doesn't matter. The never justifies, but paternalism is justified. Whereas he's dropping Mackey evidence, which says that you can only use rights.
I had 54. Okay. Can you tell me what you're extending Mackey to say?
Mackey says that any conception of any goal that you have collapses into conception of rights.
Okay.
So if you say that we have a goal of tailoring treatment to animals, it means that we would create a system of negative rights where animals would have a right to have that treatment. And the warrant is that if you have a system where people have millions of goals, you can't create like laws for all of those million goals. You wouldn't say like what to prescribe. So the only way morality or justice can function is if it says what we generally ought to do, and that means that you would never prescribe actions specifically in that regard. You would just say that people wouldn't interfere with other people. That's what rights are. It's the only way justice can function.
we're going to start where he extends the first thing he extends about babies. Is everyone ready? Okay, babies do get rights because they have the potential to have this moral system, because babies can eventually have their own sphere of morality explained in Oderberg. He only talks about babies, and I explain babies have that potential. So I do defend that all humans get rights. Extend my response to Taylor, the first one, that if we get a moral subject is just acted upon, so we don't have to give it actual rights, we just have to limit what we only do. So that means that the takeout's the Taylor argument, because even if they, so we don't, all we do is limit our arguments, so we don't have to give them actual rights. But back up to Nash, he says it doesn't make sense because my example isn't tied to justice, but I was explaining how rights work. Extend that we don't have to have all obligations based off rights. We can have a duty not based on rights, like how I have a duty to my teacher. Even if that doesn't talk about justice, it talks about rights and obligations, which is what Nash talks about. Extend the first response to Williams that Taylor treatment better gets this internal reasons for actions because people are suited to get their own needs. This justifies my own framework, because if we want to have people have their incentives for action, then we would let them act in the ways they want to act and tailor treatment to their needs. And it extends Williams for why we need internal reasons, but I explain why my framework gets that argument best. And extend the response to Yeager that we don't only look to what the reasons for action are, but the holistic reasons overall, because giving due is an action, so we have to make sure and look to the impacts of that action to make sure the treatment's actually tailored. Pain only looks to a reason for action, but it doesn't look to if we actually stop pain, so we have to look to the NC framework to make sure we tailor treatment. And extend the second response I made to Nagel that if we gave all beings with the capability to feel pain rights, then we'd paralyze action. He said all pain was bad when he answered the first turn. That feeds my argument, because then we can never take an action to give due. I explained this in the last speech. He can never have a link to justice, because if there's always some rights holder affected because they can feel pain, then we can never take action to stop someone's due from being denied. So that justifies why we use Taylor treatment. So his arguments for why I don't link to justice with the NC framework don't matter, because they've generated offense with the AC framework. So extend from the NC the standard of Taylor treatment to beings' capacities, meaning treating actors differently based on their abilities. He cross-applies Taylor, Mackey, and Nash to explain why rights are just based on duties and limiting our own actions like they're a moral subject, but my case shows the harm in saying that rights work this way. Extend Oderberg, affirming confuses preconditions for rights with rights themselves, because rights are freedoms to act, not just protection from harm. Rights allow beings to pursue their own conceptions of the good without hindrance. I'm the only one giving you a reason to prefer with the impact below Oderberg. Extend it, ignoring choice and self-advocacy and just focusing on consciousness reduces what it means to be a rights holder. If recognizing rights only means non-inflicting pain, affirming justifies dehumanization. The focus on keeping beings alive, no matter how animalistic or unfree the conditions, denies that there are times where life is worth living. So this outweighs the AC on strength and link to justice, because he says animals deserve rights because of their capability to feel pain. The NC, and they're just limits on actions like the moral subjects. The NC explains the harm in doing that, because then we don't recognize their unique capacities, for humans' unique capacities, or tailor treatment to them, because we just say they don't have freedom to take action. There are conditions where life is physically painless, but it's still not worth living. That's the reason to prefer compared to his cross-applications, because Oderberg gave a different conception of rights. He says that animal welfare is worse because it doesn't tailor treatment, but nowhere in the NC did I say I was advocating for animal welfare, so that doesn't matter. And he says off the third response to the standard that I confused positive obligations, but that's not true. I explained humans have a sphere of morality, so we don't allow for them, but we allow them to take action. It's still a negative right, stopping freedom from harm, but we still give them rights, so it's not just a positive thing. Off the AC. The problem is he's dropping turns to take out offense, extends a mirror. Granting animals equal moral status to humans lets them make choices without coercion. Like humans whose age or element precludes consent, animals need humans to paternalistically vaccinate, spay, and train them, because that protects them more than recognizing their rights for it. Thus, instead of tailoring treatment to animals, affirming forces them to fend for themselves. This gives me a link to the NCAC framework, because if he says pain's a motivation for action and he doesn't stop pain, then he doesn't get the own benefits of this framework. He doesn't tailor treatment either, because we can't make paternalistic decisions for animals. And extend the second argument that he increases oppression of animals